In August this year, we proposed the national legislation that prohibits propaganda, LGBTQI+ propaganda in schools and in kindergarten as well, because we believe that these topics don't belong in the classroom. People are just fed up. We just want to motivate them to take the power in their hand and to go to vote. In Bulgaria, we have a very unstable political scene because we are going to hold the seventh elections for the last 2 years. We're a member of NATO for 20 years, and since then, national security and the state of our own army has been disastrous.
Rada, it's a pleasure to meet you here in Strasbourg. You're a fairly newly elected member of the European Parliament, is that right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much for this invitation and the opportunity to present our Bulgarian party Revival. I'm a newly elected MEP from Bulgaria, and I'm here to represent the Bulgarian party Revival, which in Bulgarian sounds like Възраждане. So I'm a member of the political group Europe of Sovereign Nations, and maybe it's interesting to say that I also worked very closely together with Alternative for Germany as an advisor in the German Parliament for 6 years on European issues. So we continue our work here, but now on a more political level and not only on the expert level.
Sure. So your party is facing an election this Sunday. I mean, I hope this interview comes out before that, but we'll see. And what are your expectations for these elections?
Yes, in Bulgaria we have a very unstable political scene because we are going to hold the seventh elections for the last 2 years. And unfortunately, for 17 years of membership in the European Union, Bulgaria is still the poorest member state. So we can see that the parties of the status quo, as we call them in Bulgaria, it's actually very similar on a European level, have not achieved much for our country, for the sovereign interest of our nation. And we can see that the voters, our citizens, are not very pleased with their work. So it's actually a democratic process, the ongoing elections, but unfortunately we have a very low participation in the elections. We had around 30% in the last elections, which were on the 9th of June. They took part on the same day with the European elections, and even the European elections had 1 or 2% higher participation. So our main opponent is actually the apathic state, that people are just fed up. We just want to motivate them to take the power in their hand and to go to vote, because if we don't have a higher turnout at the election, we will not be able to change anything in Bulgaria. Our party is now represented with 38 deputies in the National Parliament out of 240 in total. So we had almost 15% at the last election. And right now the polls are looking very good for us, but still this very low participation on the elections is the biggest obstacle in Bulgaria.
And so that is, just to summarize, because people are so fed up with how things are going, people just say, oh, we don't even go to the elections anymore because we can change anything, or?
Exactly, but the problem is that it's also the narrative of the mainstream media. So what we always hear is that anyway, nothing is going to change, why go to elections again? Because we have the party of the status quo, which have an electoral base linked to them. What does it mean? These people who will anyway vote for them, they directly are dependent in terms of their jobs because they're in different state companies, administration, or small regions where the state of play now is almost like in feudalism. So these votes are secure for these parties, and when the majority of our citizens just lose faith in elections, this is something that's being fueled by mainstream media, very, very powerful. And that's why we also are happy that the world is changing in terms of content creators, in terms of digital platforms, in terms of ways where we can communicate with the citizens, with the voters directly through social media, just to expose what's happening really and what's also happening in this house here, which is supposed to be very democratic, but actually it's not the case. And again, thank you for this opportunity, because when we get invited in Bulgaria to interviews, it's more like a debate. It's like a debate with an opponent. So the journalist always has an agenda that they have to push, and we almost never have more than 10 seconds to say something.
Yeah, even for us in Germany, like, or for me personally, Bulgaria doesn't play the biggest role, like in my everyday politics. But when I did a little bit of research, I noticed that you have a very geopolitical, important position in the world. You're very close to Turkey, which means that refugees are probably coming from Turkey through your country towards Europe, and you're also quite close to Ukraine, Russia, I guess. So these two topics are obviously a little bit separated, but we could start maybe the refugee crisis, which has, as most people heard, just flooded Europe with illegal migrants coming through Turkey and other countries, obviously. But could you explain what the role of your local government is maybe in there? Do these people let them through, and what are the any revelations you can give us?
Yes. In Bulgaria, it's a topic that's causing a lot of unrest right now, because the situation is becoming more and more dangerous. You don't see it at first sight, but it's the fact, because we're the country of first arrival, so they arrive to Bulgaria. But the problem is not that these people are evil, or we don't want to portray them in a bad way, but it's illegal, it's not controlled, and it's a threat to national security and to the lives of citizens in our country, as well as it's in Germany. One of the last attacks, there's so many in Germany that you could not keep track of them, unfortunately. The one that took place in Solingen, the perpetrator of this attack, he was supposed to be brought back to Bulgaria, actually. Mm-hmm. And because the German authorities did not do their job, they had to bring him back in Bulgaria. So this could have happened in my homeland. I'm very sad that this happened at all, but we are not protected, even though that most migrants don't want to stay with us. They want to go to countries where they have a more generous social system. But if you keep the strict application of the Schengen rules, the migrants has to be brought to the country where they first entered the European Union, and we are such a country. And right now, our government at home, which is really following orders from Brussels and just playing in this globalized European new world, is having the priority of the European agenda in the first place. And if Bulgaria comes up somewhere, it's going to be really a last resort. So they stated that they will very strictly apply Schengen rules, which is probably going to be the first country that is strictly going to apply, because we know that Greece is not taking back migrants. Germany is having a lot of difficulties to bring back people to Italy or Greece, but Bulgaria said they will strictly follow the guidelines of Brussels and take back people like, unfortunately, the one that caused Solingen. So our border is in a very, very grave state. Actually, I was there with my party, Revival, and also with the AFD. We visited the border, and we could see that there are parts of this border wall that are not protected at all, that have been torn apart and then somehow repaired, but not really, because you could very easily go through. So there are channels of traffic there. There are people who benefit from that financially. So this whole migration crisis and suffering has turned into an industry. And what's happening here in the European Parliament and the whole European institutions idea of how migration is supposed to work is that it's fueling it. It's fueling the deaths of people who are coming illegally and uncontrolled. So it's causing actually more suffering than it's alleviating
also
suffering.
on the people who are coming. Like
Yes,
they
also
come with the expectation of having a better life, but sometimes they are the ones suffering as well.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
They have a very different idea and different expectation from the reality here, and let alone the different cultures and the different idea of how work looks like. Like, for example, in Germany, we know this is Leistungsgesellschaft, so you have to provide for yourself and work to be able to succeed in some way and to enjoy the benefits of this society, of this system, of this country. But this is not something that's communicated. So we have through the European Union a lot of suffering in the whole migration crisis.
And what is your party expected to do, like if you somehow set up the election and you win the election and you are appointed the prime minister of Bulgaria, I guess. What would be your first set of action regarding the refugee crisis?
We have said very clearly that we want to protect our borders. This is why they exist. This is why we're a sovereign state. We can go back in history to Peace of Westphalia. We can explain why this system is built that way. It's not so difficult. So there are also other countries that protect their border with their military. So if case be, if that's necessary, we're ready to send the military to protect the border. Actually, our neighboring country, Turkey, is practicing that at the moment. When we visited the border with Turkey on the other side, you could see Turkish armed military forces guarding their national border. So this is actually normal still in some countries in the world, but on this topic, it's very clear. We even have a plan calculating how many officials we would need for that, and we have that capacity. We also have that capacity at the moment as a sovereign state without involvement of European agencies, Frontex or otherwise, because to exist as a sovereign state, this is one of the main prerequisites to be able to secure your border.
Sure. And in Germany, obviously, there is the situation that, okay, even if you protect the border, you have so many people that are inside that need to be deported, basically, like just legally saying. Is that a similar case in Bulgaria, I guess? And how are you planning to do that?
In Bulgaria, the system of citizenship and the system of becoming part of integrating into Bulgarian society is a little bit more complicated and length, as a
It's not so easy to become a
long
citizen.
time. Yes, it's very difficult actually to become Bulgarian citizen because we have a different idea of citizenship. And I know in Germany you have it in the Grundgesetz, and it's you just have to recognize the authority of your basic law, and then you're German. But we believe that there is also different components to what does it mean to be citizen, and what does it mean to be part of it. And we don't have that issue in this context. I mean, we're not so attractive as a state for migrants from all over the world. Let's put it as it is. But it's still causing a lot of turmoil because we're on that route. We're the first country on that migration route. And if Schengen rules are applied strictly, these people who came uncontrolled, illegal, just stating asylum on the border, they have to come to our country. And then we have to deal with that. And the European Union has plans to build asylum centers on the borders of countries like Bulgaria, because we have a border with a third state, which is Turkey, which is not in the European Union. So our government agreed to that, and we see that very critically.
So that's obviously a challenge that if you come to power that you would need to deal with. But I would like to touch another topic, which is the current situation in Ukraine and Russia, and what role does Bulgaria play in the whole NATO scheme? You're a member of NATO, right?
We're a member of NATO for 20 years, and since then, national security and the state of our own army has been disastrous. We lost a lot of own capacity in our army, of course, with the promise that NATO will protect us if that should happen. But again, as a sovereign state, we believe that we should be able to first protect ourselves. And we also have NATO military bases in Bulgaria. We are obviously part of what's happening right now. The official line of the government and of the parties of the status quo is that they support everything that comes from Brussels. So sanctions against Russian Federation, military support, all kinds of support. Just today we voted on a resolution on frozen Russian assets. So the EU is really pushing to use the interest on those frozen Russian assets to sponsor future loans for Ukraine. And this is something that's going beyond everything we can imagine, also in the financial sector, because we are not going to be attractive for investment in Europe. We're just going to go to go further down. We have different discussions on competitiveness here. The very much awaited Draghi report, which basically states nothing new, but just requires more power for the EU. So the way the problems are going to be solved, according to this Draghi report, is to provide Brussels and the EU with more supranational power. But no matter how much power you give to Brussels, when you play as a thief, as somebody who steals the interest rates of assets, I don't think it's going to be a very positive signal for investors outside the European Union. And we very much need this in our economy, in Europe, in Bulgaria. So the official position in my country is that it's supporting military aid, financial aid, and all the declarations that basically state Ukraine has to fight until victory, just blend out the reality, just fuel more money. But actually people there are dying and we're just sending money. And we think it's something that has to be solved diplomatically. It has to be finally resolved on the table of diplomatic negotiations. And because we have a history that's very related to the Russian Federation, to Ukraine as well, we see that these are two nations who are brotherly nations, and how they're in this horrible war, in this horrible conflict that's fueled from outside.
Yeah, and obviously because you're so close, just geographically to Russia, I guess the people there have and also historically, you explained to me before the interview that the Russians helped you with your independence, is that right?
Yes, and Bulgaria is an independent state since 1878. And at this point, it was the Russian-Ottoman War of freedom. That's how it's also stated in our textbooks in school. We achieved freedom through this war. And it's nearly impossible to hammer this into the brain of Bulgarians that they have to hate everything Russian, they have to hate Russians, no matter how they are now looking at the current people in power in Russia. It's really not possible for propaganda from the outside to change the mentality in Bulgaria. And they're trying this very hard in all possible ways. They're trying to prevent us from going to the monument we have that really represents this freedom that we achieved, by repairing the monument and just closing it for people. But we actually started a campaign where we stated we want to have 100,000 people on this monument in Shipka. And I also invited Alternative for Germany. They were there. They really witnessed how much people cherish this moment in our history. So it's not so easy to rewrite history.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the elections, like I guess or I assume that you're quite popular for this stance. Like you're obviously criticized by the mainstream media and the people in power, but your voters and the people are more tending towards liking Russia and having a more, I guess, neutral position in the Ukraine and Russian war. Is that right?
Yes, 80% of Bulgarians don't want to be involved in this war. They don't want to be part of something that's not their war. And our conditions for, say, having talks with different parties, because we, as opposed to other political parties, we were never in government. We have been 10 years in the political landscape. We're almost 3 years in national parliament, but we've never been in government. And we want to prove that we can provide a different position for our country. But to sit on the negotiation table, we first want to speak about cutting this military aid, also an end to the sanctions against the Russian Federation, and thinking about the referendum on the Eurozone, on our NATO membership, and the exact conditions we have to be member state in the European Union, because we signed up to conditions that were very detrimental to our national economy, to our energy sector, and to the sovereign, legitimate interests of our state. So it's time to revise these conditions, and if some different political forces able to negotiate on these topics, we are really prepared on national level, on European level, to provide solutions to that.
You have already started, even with a party of just 14% in the parliament, you have started to have a victory recently with the LGBTQ law.
Yes.
In your country, could you explain the story behind that real quick before we end this because of the time?
Thank you for this question. In August this year, we proposed the national legislation that prohibits propaganda, LGBTQI+ propaganda in schools and in kindergarten as well, because we believe that these topics don't belong in the classroom. These are things that some people from different interest groups, they can do whatever they like, but we don't want to have that in our classrooms. And a majority of our society is also rather conservative, or just they believe this is normal, that this should not belong to schools. So we proposed this legislation as an opposition party, and we could unite parts of some parties, or even some parties supported as a whole. And this legislation came into effect in Bulgaria. And on European level, there was also reactions. There were some member states that proposed a similar legislation, referring it to ours. There was one in Slovakia, there was one in Italy, because we also introduced a definition of traditional sexual orientation. So when you have the definition, everything that's something different is not traditional. Of course, it is there, but we cannot just put everything on the same level as this is normal. We speak about it. Actually, all the topic of sexual preferences or this type of things don't belong in the classroom. That's what we believe.
Yeah. All right, Rada, I wish your party best of luck in the elections. We will definitely speak in the coming months, I guess, again.
Thank you, Max.
And see how it turns out. And yeah, looking forward to speaking to you again. Have a good day.
Thank you.